Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Larry Leonard, and I'm here to teach you how to find the courthouse door, wherever that is. I'm really excited about being able to spread a philosophy more than the content. You know, when you go to content-based seminars, you walk out the next day, it's a little fuzzy, and a week later, you really don't remember the content of the seminar as far as the statutes, except you know enough now that you know there's a problem, and you can go look up the answer. What I want to do is talk with you about a philosophy of practicing law and blend that in to quote how to find the courthouse door. And my objectives today are to expand your scope of knowledge somewhat, hopefully a little bit, and provide you with one or two or three items that you'll walk out of here and you'll remember and you'll be able to utilize in your practice. The philosophy is, and Robbie asked me, she said, I'm here for the part of be nice. And I'm going to try to stress that throughout the proceedings, and I'll give you a very practical example to start with. We got notice of a hearing the other day, and a hearing on a motion for summary judgment, which obviously would be dispositive of my case, I'm the plaintiff in this situation, was set for a day that we were scheduled to be in Austin, Texas to go to a dear friend's daughter's wedding. Ken Brooding's on the other side of the case, and Ken's an old friend, and he was Tulsa County Bar President 3 years before I was. So I got on the phone and I called Ken and I said, I've got a problem. You know, the hearing's scheduled on the day before the wedding, and we're going to be in Austin, Texas. And Ken said, we can't have that. So we got the judge's clerk on a conference call, and in 2 or 3 minutes, she suggested an alternate date, and Ken said, I've got a problem with that date because I've got a brief due in the Supreme Court, and I hate to have a hearing on the same day my brief's due. So again, we moved it a couple of days the other way, and we got everything accommodated. We didn't have to file motions. We didn't have to do anything except pick up the phone and call somebody and say, hey, I've got a conflict and a problem. And that's in some of the rules we're going to look at later in the civility rules. If there is no prejudice to your client, for goodness sakes, be accommodating to other counsel if it's at all possible. To expand your horizons is, I think, critical. And to that end, I like to see people get involved, obviously, in the Tulsa County Bar Association, because it's a great association and it's free. If you take advantage of the membership benefits, membership in the Bar Association is free, and it provides you with local networking in whatever group you want to participate in. If you do a lot of family law, there's a very active family law group. They have their own seminars. It provides you to get to know your opposing counsel in some context other than that particular case. If you want to do community service, you can do community service through the Bar Association. Our community outreach committee is awesome. We do a tremendous amount of good in this community. If you want to get involved in court matters, you can serve on the Court Operations Committee. The Court Operations Committee has helped work with the bench to change our local rules in some instances, and it's been through the input of attorneys. I'll give you a good example. Years ago, the judges adopted a policy that pro se people in divorce cases got to go first before lawyers and their clients. So you're standing down there with the client and you're billing him however many dollars an hour. And this actually occurred in court one day when Judge Hogshead was on the civil bench, and he's an incredibly good guy. He's very patient. And he looked at this lady, and I'm standing there now with my client, and there are 5 or 6 other lawyers standing there with their clients. And so collectively, you're probably looking at $2,500 an hour standing there waiting on this pro se party. And the judge said, ma'am, I'm sorry, I can't grant your divorce. You never served your husband. And she looked up and said, so what? Anyway, that's just an example. But through the Court Operations Committee and the lawyers expressing their concerns, we were able to get that changed, so to speak. So as you know, now you can go down on agreed upon divorces, you can get right in and you can get right out, and it really is a good service for your client. We all need to reduce stress in the practice of law. Sandra and I were talking just before the seminar because I wanted to confirm some facts. When Pat O'Connor was president of the Bar Foundation a couple of years ago, we actually had a seminar by a doctor who came in here and had written a book and talked about ways to reduce stress in practice. And the reason we thought this was really pertinent at that time In that 1 year period, we had 30 attorney suicides in Oklahoma. We had 15 attorney suicides among Tulsa County lawyers in a 1 year period of time. And some of those folks I knew very well and never dreamed that they were under that kind of stress in their lives. But there are a lot of things you can do, and like one of them is, like I said, pick up the phone and call opposing counsel. If you've got a conflict or got a problem, when I was a young lawyer, Dwayne Pollard was my assigned mentor. He was an incredibly talented lawyer. And I was in my office one day, and he came in to check on a case, and he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, I'm going to file this motion to compel these dirty bums. They haven't answered my discovery, and I'm going to get them." And he said, "Why don't you just pick up the phone?" It's like, oh, okay. So I picked up the phone. I called opposing counsel. He had some illness in his family. We can all do that. You always he said, that's the easy way and the hard way. Always give the easy way a shot. It'll make your life so much easier if you'll do that. Okay, how do you find the courthouse door? I was amazed when I started working about 5 weeks ago to just put little tidbits together to present this seminar. And this Tulsa County Clerk map, for all of you that don't live, work, and office downtown, this is tremendously helpful. And the thing that I was impressed, not only does it show all the streets, but it shows all of the buildings and how they relate to each other. Now, the one thing you are going to have to do is keep up with the one-way streets, because it seems like they change about every 6 months. But anyway, I thought this is really a handy little deal. If you take this back to your office and you've got clients and you're going to meet them at the courthouse or you're going to meet them in federal court or whatever, you can fax this, you can copy and fax this to them and circle it or whatever. And I think that would really be helpful. That's pretty simple, but it's another way to reduce stress in your practice. The Tulsa County Clerk, I believe it was on August 1st, changed their computer system. And you want to make certain when you go down, I don't know how many of you, I would say probably some of you prepare your own documents. I don't. I'm too old. I'm an old dog. I can't learn that trick. My secretary does all that. But if you do, this gives you guidelines, or you can give it to your secretary, and it gives you guidelines on how the document has to be formatted, what the spacing requirements are, and everything, so that the county clerk will record your documents. Again, that's really pretty simple, but until I started putting these materials together, I didn't know the county clerk did this. So that's a great deal. Ad valorem taxes. This little pamphlet on ad valorem taxes basically tells you everything you need to know about how the taxes are calculated, how they're assessed, why they're assessed, where they go. And I think all of us have clients at one time or another. You get that angry phone call because they got their yearly assessment. That when that law was passed, it was designed to be a limitation. It was designed to make it to where your property couldn't be increased in assessed value more than 5% in any 1 year. But what happened, and the minute that law got passed, everybody started automatically increasing your assessed value 5% a year. And you just have to live with that. Unless you really have, I've gone down a couple times and appeared, and unless you really have some compelling evidence like an appraisal or a recent sale or whatever, they're not going to listen to you, and they're not going to give you any relief, because the market value of property generally still is way below the true market value. And what they're trying to do is to get that assessed value to catch up to the market value. But you can talk with your client, you can explain some of the things in this booklet, and you still may or may not go down and appear, but at least you'll be better informed. I was talking with my wife last night about this seminar, and she said, "Well, I want you to do one thing for me." And she gave me a very practical example that I'd forgotten, and I've got an example. Folks, it's a long race, and the way you conduct yourself in any one hearing can be problematic if you're not civil and you're not courteous. I'll give you an example. I argued a case, a motion for summary judgment in front of Judge Wiseman. That's how long ago that was, when she was still on the civil bench. And we argued for over an hour. And I think the other side put forth excellent points. I think we put forth our points. And in the end, thankfully, the judge ruled in our favor. And my opponent just started pounding her foot on the floor saying, "Judge, I don't agree with you." That really didn't do anybody any good. I can guarantee you that won't do her any good in her future appearances before that particular judge, and it just made everything so much more difficult. It's a long race. Marcia had two friends that knew each other. They weren't close friends, but they'd both gone to high school together in St. Louis. And one of them had just become a partner in a law firm, a large law firm here. At that time, I was a partner in. And this other gentleman was working at his profession, and he's in screen and acting and probably not as financially successful at that point as the other fellows. So they drove up just coincidentally, and they stopped at a stop sign together, and the attorney looked over and kind of did one of those and then drove off. Okay? 2 years later, that attorney was no longer a partner in the firm. He was no longer in Tulsa. And the other gentleman literally hit the pinnacle of his profession, and he now arranges productions for AAPG all over the world. It's a long race. And in 2 years, I mean, I can imagine how he felt when he kind of got buzzed off, you know, and then you look what happened 2 years later. I'll give you my personal example, and I'm not a Sooner, I'm a Jayhawk, okay? But years ago, OU was looking for a coach, and John Blake, who ended up not being such a great coach, but he's an incredible guy. John Blake was one of the applicants, and so was Howard Snellenberger. They wouldn't even grant John Blake an interview. There was outrage in the sports columns and the newspapers, and they hired Snellenberger. And you all know what happened. He had a disastrous season. He had one kid almost die from heat because of what he put him through at practice. And a year later, guess who was the head coach at the University of Oklahoma? John Blake. It's a long race. Okay, I'll do a little bit. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention. I really do want you to write down a question. You don't have to sign it. In fact, Chris Mansfield, who's a young attorney in our office, I said yesterday, do you think it'd be corny if I said, hey, if you have a question, write it down and we'll try and get to it? And he said, no, as long as nobody has to sign it, because then you can laugh at a question if it's yours and act like it's somebody else's. So anyway, if you have a question, write it down and pass it over, and we'll take those up when we've got 10 or 15 minutes left. This is a pamphlet that Judge Morrissey presented at the Tulsa Title and Probate Lawyers, April 12, 2007. My time does fly. But it's a very, very good pamphlet, and it talks about heirship in 84 OS Section 213. And the easy way to remember when you're trying to figure out who the heirs are is you go down first. You go down to the lineal descendants first. If you don't have any, and if you have lineal descendants, then they're going to inherit. I'm talking about intestate. I'm not talking about with a will, because obviously with a will you can do anything you want. If there's no lineal descendants, then you go back up the chain. So you go back up and look for mom and dad or grandparents. And if they're there, then they're going to, each class excludes the other, so to speak. If there's nobody up there, then you start looking outward. You start looking at brothers and sisters, etc. And again, each class is exclusive if you include the descendants in that class. So if you have brothers and sisters, and one of those brothers and sisters died and left children, those children are going to step up in the other brother and sister's place and take a proportionate share. But this, if you read the terminology, because that's obviously awfully important, and Judge Morrissey was good enough to go through here and give you these different definitions. Per capita and per stirpes, I'm sure you all know the difference in that, but it's important. Anyway, this is an excellent handout, and I love the title, Who's Her Baby's Daddy? Could You Be an Heir to Anna Nicole's Fortune? This is also a good example of how working in Tulsa County and networking in Tulsa County